Hello, Gene Schwimmer here, and welcome to me. I guess we have a recurring pattern here. I just seem to be having trouble finding time to make these videos, but after a certain amount of time goes by, I just feel an obligation that I have to go out there and make one, talk about something. I wanted to talk about, as I'm recording this is the day after Donald Trump declared finally, that a president did, that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. In other words, he stated the obvious. I wanted to talk about that. I may do it in the future. Everybody's talking about it, but I wanted to make a point that's related to that because a lot of people are very disappointed, and they're disappointed because they think it's going to, well, a lot of them, they just hate Israel, and let's be honest, a lot of them just hate Jews, don't want them to win, don't want Israel to be safe and independent. But you have a lot of liberals who are upset because they think it's going to, quote unquote, blow up the peace process. As Donald Trump himself said, congratulations to him, if not recognizing Jerusalem as the capital would have led to peace, it would have led to peace a long time ago. The argument in favor of keeping the status quo, of signing another waiver, is that if you keep doing that same thing over and over, that eventually you're going to get the result that you want. Maybe you can remember Bill Clinton saying something similar. It's almost, well, it is a cliche by now, but in one of the presidential debates with George Bush, Senior H.W. Bush, he said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. Donald Trump took those words to heart and is going to do something different. I've talked about this in the past, what he's going to do differently or what should be done. I'm going to revisit it in the future, but for now what I want to talk about is why they are so disappointed. These liberals and Europeans, sorry, I guess I'm repeating myself, same thing, European liberal, pretty much the same thing with a few exceptions. But the reason for these people being so upset about this change of policy is that they wanted the negotiations to succeed. To do what Donald Trump has done is basically to admit that their approach wasn't working. And when you say that approach isn't working, what you're saying is that, well, you could be saying that a solution cannot be negotiated following that methodology. But what you're also saying, and this is what I think is correct, is that some things cannot be negotiated. That's why we have wars, unfortunately. A war is just, as somebody said, politics by another means. When you have two sides that cannot solve a dispute, sometimes you have to go to war. Liberals don't want to believe that. Their worldview is that everything can be negotiated. And when they are in a negotiation, they will do everything to make sure that the negotiation succeeds. Now, I'll do a little comparison here. We're talking right now about between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but you could also go back and talk about between the United States and Russia, or you could talk about in between the JCPOA, the agreement with the Iranians, and that actually is a perfect example. I knew when people were wondering, well, would there be some kind of agreement? Would there be any kind of success? I knew there would. I knew there would be an agreement. There was not a doubt in my mind, and the reason there was no doubt was because the parties negotiating for the United States were liberal Democrats, and their worldview is that everything can be negotiated. Therefore, if a negotiation fails, that destroys their whole worldview. Then they have to admit that sometimes you have to go to war, or some problems have to be managed, cannot be solved by negotiation. So if you're the Iranians, there were reports of Jaffrey, the Iranian negotiator, just screaming at John Kerry, just screaming, and acting like a spoiled child. And what did John Kerry do? He just sat there or stood there and just took it. He did not do what a conservative would have done. What Ronald Reagan did at Reykjavik is just get up and walk away if you don't see a deal. Or you have Donald Trump with Congress talking about DACA to legalize these immigrants. And Donald Trump wanted some things in return. He wants his wall. He wants mandatory E-Verify, a few other things. The Democrats don't want to give him anything. They just want him, as he said, to just be able to flood the country with illegal immigrants, basically give them what they want on DACA in return for nothing. And Donald Trump, he said in one of his tweets, he said, "I don't see a deal here," or "there is no deal here," exclamation point, end of story. Well, we'll see what happens with the Democrats, but when they're negotiating internationally, they are always willing to give up. So if you are the Iranians, you know you can do whatever you want because eventually you're going to get everything you want, maybe except for a couple face-saving little sops to Barack Obama, so you can say that we didn't give away the whole story. Even though we did, the agreement was front-loaded. They got hundreds of billions of dollars, and basically we just got a delay in their nuclear program. It starts up in 10 years. That's because the Iranians knew that they didn't really have to agree to anything. They could just sit there and just demand the same thing over and over, and eventually they would get what they want because it would be so important. Being able to say that he reached an agreement would be more important to Barack Obama than the substance of the agreement. This is repeated over and over. So when you have now the Palestinians and the Israelis, you have people finally admitting that the Palestinians are being ridiculous. They're making demands that they would never get, but you have the international community and you have liberals here kowtowing and coddling the Palestinians because they don't, oh, well, you could go back to the Camp David talks that Bill Clinton hosted when you had Ehud Barak and you had Arafat there. Remember that scene of Madeleine Albright running after Yasser Arafat, begging him practically on her knees, except you can't run after somebody on your knees. That's very hard, especially for someone her age. She ran after him, physically ran after him to try to convince him to come back to the talks because they wanted the agreement to succeed, and that always results, or it has in the past, into pressuring Israel to make concessions, to leave Gaza, to delay building settlements, to do something to convince the Palestinians to sit there and not walk away from the negotiations, even though they're sitting there and refusing to negotiate. And that's because of this belief that they have that they just have to sit there and wait and wait and wait, and the United States will eventually pressure the Israelis, and the international community will, the Europeans and the Scandinavians, especially the European Union, will pressure the Israelis into giving the Palestinians everything they want in return for nothing. Now we have a president, Donald Trump, who has stood up and said that's not going to happen, and the liberals are going crazy. That is why. If you want to know, besides, I say, hating Israel, and in many cases, especially in Europe, hating Jews or just not wanting them to win or something. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, not my job to figure it out, but that is the problem, that they will not. I guess I'm getting into what I was going to talk about before or in the future. I might as well at least give a brief summary now, something I've said in the past. They just can't do what actually I think the Saudis are about to do. And if I read correctly, this new prince, Mohammed Salman, is to tell them that you've lost. You're not, it's a fantasy. Jerusalem is not going to be divided. You have to accept that. You have to accept that you've lost. These fantasies you're feeding your people will never be realized. And if you don't want to realize, then that's fine. You can sit there stewing your own juices. Life will go on without you. That is what I see happening now. But to get back to my original point, so I can end on my original point, it's nice to have a president who will look at the facts and walk away from a deal if necessary, rather than act as somebody's enabler, rather than talk to the Palestinians like they're children. And kudos to Congress too. They passed the Taylor Force Act that will withhold funding unfortunately not all funding, but a lot of funding to the Palestinians if they don't stop paying salaries to terrorists and the families of terrorists that are sitting in Israeli jails for having killed innocent people, Israelis and Taylor Force, the American. It's inconceivable to me that we're going to give money to people that are paying salaries to people that kill Americans, okay? I mean, go to any country and you have an incentive there for them to kill you. Why not? And because they go to paradise, and their family gets, if they get killed, their family gets a salary, they go to paradise. It's a win-win situation for them. And then they get streets named after them. It goes on and on. I'm going on and on as usual. Once I start, I have trouble stopping, so I'm going to end right now. Maybe I'll edit out little parts of this to make it shorter, but what can I say? I'm not doing this every day. I don't get a lot of practice doing it, and, well, I keep saying I'm going to end and I don't do it, so I'm doing it now for sure. Going to end. Share this with your friends. Subscribe. Click that little thumbs up button, and I'll try to see you as soon as I can. Even though very few people watch these, I enjoy doing them. Hope I'm reaching somebody. And until next time, bye.
You got a plan, darling?
I always got a plan. They don't ever work, but I always got one.